بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing in our lessons on Umdat ul-Fiqh, the reliance or the reliable source of fiqh by Imam Ibn Qudama al-Hanbali al-Maqdisi rahimahullah. Last week we covered two issues, so we'll review what we covered and then we'll begin today's lesson. So for those of us who were not here last week, we covered two major issues which the author he began with in the chapter of At-Tahara, purification, and in the subject of Al-Miyah, water. And so the first thing we learned last week is that water is pure and purifying. That was the first thing we learned. Water in Islam, when we have water, it's pure and purifying. Means you use water to clean yourself and other things, but water itself is pure as well. We also learned that water is used when you want to make wudu, or you want to do ghusl, the shower, or anything to do with lifting ritual impurity from yourself. At the same time, water is used to clean najasat, impurities. So those were the two major issues we covered in the text. And for those of us who are not familiar, we're studying this particular fiqh manual, which is a beginner book. It's in the Hanbali madhab, but you don't have to be Hanbali to study it. Right? What's in it is much benefit. So inshallah, we're going to read today and continue from that, issue by issue. And the author, he says, rahimahullah, فَإِذَا بَلَغَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْنِ أَوْ كَانَ جَارِيًا لَمْ يُنَجِّسْهُ شَيْءٌ إِلَّا مَا غَيَّرَ لَوْنَهُ أو طعمه أو ريحه وما سوى ذلك ينجس بمخالطة النجاسة. So we'll take line by line. He says, and this is issue number 3. So we study fiqh here issue by issue. Mas'ala, the third issue. إذا بلغ الماء قلتين, if water reaches what's called قلتين, أو كان جاريا, or water is flowing, لم ينجسه شيء, nothing can make it impure. So the third issue then is the author is teaching us that water can be divided into two types. And this is in terms of its size. So I'm going to repeat. He says if water reaches a level called qullatayn, I'm going to explain what that is. Or if water is flowing, a river, ocean, a creek, nothing can make it impure. So what he's saying here is water reaches this level. If me and you came and, for example, poured urine, of course no one will do this, but if you poured urine into flowing water, it's not going to become najis. You take water that reaches the status of qullatayn, and somebody poured urine into that size, that amount of water. The water will not become impure due to that amount of impurity. And this is what he's teaching us, that water can be divided in terms or in consideration of its size into two types. Large amount of water, small amount of water. Ma'un kathir or ma'un qalil. So that's the first benefit. This is what we're taking, the third issue. Water, bi'itibar, in consideration of its size, in its amount, is ma'un qalil or ma'un kathir. Small amount of water, large amount of water. Now what's the difference between the two? The author taught us right now, ma'un kathir, a lot of water, doesn't become impure by impurities just coming in contact with it. And the opposite is true. If it's not a large amount of water, it's a small amount of water. If some kind of impurity came in contact with small amount of water, it becomes impure immediately. This is what he's trying to tell us. But before we get there, just remember, water now can be divided into those two categories. Large amount and small amount. And so as we read the book, we're going to keep seeing that the ulama, our scholars, categorize water into categories so that you can understand how to benefit from it. So the first one, a lot of water, ma'un kathir, and a small amount of water, which is ma'un qalil. What's the difference between a lot of water and a small amount of water? What's the criteria that makes one large and one small? In the opinion of the Imam, Ibn Qudama, and the opinion of the Hanbalis, amongst others of the other madhahib, if water reaches qullatayn, and whatever is above that status, that's large water. If the water cannot be described as being qullatayn, it's not large amount of water. So some of us are probably thinking, what's qullatayn? Just give me a second, we're going to get there. So the idea is if water reaches a status called qullatayn, that's large amount of water. If it's qullatayn or more. If it's less than qullatayn, it is not a lot of water. Now again, somebody may say, brother, what's the big difference? The difference, and according to the text of the scholar Imam Ibn Qudama and the Hanbalis and others who hold this view, if water is large, if small amounts of impurity come in contact with it, it doesn't do anything to make it impure. That's because it's a large amount of water. But a small amount of water, if it comes in contact with some small amount of najis, immediately becomes impure. That's a big difference. Because one of the conditions of wudu, for example, ablution, is water. So some of us may be thinking, again, many of us maybe when I hear the first two lessons, we explained some of the issues regarding these kind of books in the fiqh and why it's important. What is the implication or application for us? I go to the wudu area to make wudu, and I have a small amount of water, and this small amount of water, maybe something fell into it. It could be impure, could not be impure. I'm not using the faucet, I'm just using a bottle. I can't make wudu according to the shaykh with that small amount of water now. That's what he's trying to tell you. Versus somebody who's outside, he's camping, he's taking a trip, he's outside in front of the river. Somebody far away on the one side of the river, maybe he's using the washroom. You're on this side of the river, you want to make wudu. Can you make wudu? Yes. This is the difference between the two, brothers and sisters. This is very important. Because these kind of issues, many times people take it for granted. Again, most of us, maybe we never thought about the implications or applications. And we're going to give more examples to make it clear. If you agree to this, you understand this point now, the shaykh, what's his proof for the fact there's such thing as qullatayn or big water and small water? What's the proof? Hadith Abdullah ibn Umar. Okay, there's a hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, where the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, إِذَا كَانَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْنِ لَمْ يَحْمِلِ الْخَبَثِ. If water reaches the level of qullatayn, it will not become impure. And what does it mean it will not become impure? It will not become impure if it comes in contact with impurity. إِذَا كَانَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْنِ لَمْ يَحْمِلِ الْخَبَثِ. If water reaches the level of qullatayn, it does not carry or does not become impure. Therefore, this is the first benefit we learn. So when the author says, فَإِذَا بَلَغَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْن, when water reaches qullatayn, this is what he's talking about. And then he adds one more category of water to this, or one type of water, أَوْ كَانَ جَارِيًا. Second type of water, which is similar to qullatayn in ruling, is running water. Running water is water which is flowing. For example, we said the river, the lake, the ocean. If running water comes in contact with some impurity, it doesn't affect that water. And obviously there's conditions to both statements I just said in a minute. We're going to get to it. But the idea is running water is pure. You and I, when we go to the river or the creek to wash our clothes, to make wudu, to do whatever, we're not worried about the fact that somebody came before you and used the water in a different way. Why? Because it's running water. I used one part of the water, the next person came, that part moved down the stream. It got purified by the rest of the water. And the proof for the fact that running water doesn't carry any impurities, just like qullatayn, hadith Abu Hurairah, Bukhari and Muslim, many of us, we might know it. And this version is in the Sunan, right? But it's there, authentic. The Prophet ﷺ taught us an etiquette. لا يبولن أحدكم في الماء الدائم ثم يغتسل منه. There's a hadith the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us, none of you should urinate in running water, in stagnant water. None of you should urinate in stagnant water. Then make wudu from that water, or shower in that water. All right, so this is a benefit from this point, but a benefit outside of this point. If you go on and use the washroom, don't use washroom running in stagnant water. I mean, it goes without saying, but there's adab for this. In Islam, the etiquette of using the washroom, this is one of them. But let's say now somebody was to use the washroom in water which is running. It's not the best to do that, first of all, but it doesn't make the water impure. Because the Prophet said stagnant water, which is da'im, not moving. Another version of the hadith says, alladhi la yajri, water that is not flowing. Which means water which is flowing, it's okay. It's not the same as water that's stagnant. Another example to make it clear, Bukhari and Muslim, hadith in Al-Bukhari and Muslim, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, what would one of you think if you had a river at the front of his door? He showered or he washed in it 5 times a day. Would there remain any impurities on their body? And the Sahaba said, of course not. He said, that's the example of the 5 salah. See the hadith, the example is, you have a river in front of your house, you wash it in 5 times a day. That's like praying 5 times a day. You clean your sins. So the Prophet gave the example of running water here that purifies you. The idea, all of this teaches us, running water, you don't worry about the impurities coming in contact with it. The only concern you would have is when there's a lot of impurity in the water. For example, you come to the lake and you find it all yellow, all brown. Now you're going to say, okay, I can't use this water. Because you're going to find out if it's impure or not. Let's say it's clearly impure. So much urine fell into the water. Of course you're not going to use it. But we're talking about the example of someone put a little bit. So now the author, he benefited us with a benefit which is, and this is issue number 3, I'm going to summarize it. Water can be divided into 2 types. A large amount of water, small amount of water. Small amount of water is any type of water that doesn't reach the status called قلتين. إذا كان الماء قلتين لم يحمل الخبث. Therefore, now we benefit that when you and I are using water for purification purposes, it is important to take in consideration the amount of water you have. Now the author, he qualifies his statement by saying, إِلَّا مَا غَيَّرَ لَوْنَهُ أَوْ طَعْمَهُ أَوْ رِيحَهُ. Now he says, except what changes the color, taste, or scent of water. Except what changes the color, taste, or scent of the water. So what is he teaching us? Issue number 4. This is issue number 4 now. We just said water that reaches this large amount, it would never become impure by the contact of small amounts of impurity unless one of the 3 qualities of water are affected. So the benefit we take from issue number 4, water has 3 qualities. Everyone has to know this. Water has 3 qualities. ثلاث أوصاف. Water has a color, it has a taste, and it has a scent. And that goes for other things too. But water specifically, because we need water for your wudu. So water has color, and what's the color of water? Clear. That's what we say, water has to be clear. Water, when it comes to its taste, it tastes like water. Water is tasteless. The last one is the scent. It doesn't have a scent. Now, if this is the qualities of water, if water, one of these 3 qualities become changed by something, call it any agent, pure or impure, that affects the water. This is what he's trying to tell us. Go back to the example of the large amount of water, قلتين, right? The water that's a lot. I pour a little bit of urine into that, it's not going to change the 3 qualities. I pour a lot of urine into that, it's going to make the water yellow, it's no longer water, it's najis now, impure. Another example, someone has, right, a kind of, let's say, a big pool of water, and he pours something into it, or he drops some liquid into it. I don't know, tea leaves. The tea leaves are on top of the water. Maybe a little bit of the water changed, but the water is still water. For the vast majority of it, it's still clear, tasteless, scentless. Maybe just a little bit has changed on top. This is still water, because the qualities did not change significantly enough. And I'm going to get to the idea of significant changes. So me and you have to know the first benefit in this issue, in issue number 4, water has 3 qualities. Everyone has to know. But sometimes people, they don't understand, the power of this. I go to the wudu room again to make wudu, and I turn on the tap, and the water is coming out as brown. Can I make wudu with it? Yeah, that's a true question, huh? Someone is saying yes, no. Well, we have to keep reading. But so far what we know, you can't. So far what we learned, you can't do it. Why? Because that's not water. Another example would be somebody, he goes to the river. And the part of the river that he sees or he's at, it's clearly smells strong and the color is changed. When you look at it, he can't call it water. It's too much something else in it, algae or fungi or whatever it is. That wouldn't be water, you move on to somewhere else. This is very important. Because nowadays, if someone says, I don't know anything about these issues, I just go and I make wudu. No wudu, no salah. No salah, you have to pray again. This is serious, right? But at the same time, the Sharia made things easy. So we're going to see that as long as somebody knows the rules, when in doubt, what do? Go back to the principle. This is the benefit we're going to learn from this. Because now, if I didn't teach you or we didn't go through this together, me and you could be in a state of confusion often. And how many Muslims are in a state of confusion? Maybe they don't know, can I make wudu with this? Can I not make wudu with this water? Or some of them will say, I can't pray salah, there's no water. Right? And probably some of you wonder, can anyone get to that state? Yes, they can. So the benefit we're taking, at least we know what water is. Water is water. Remember the qualities it has. The color is see-through, the taste is tasteless, and the scent, no scent. Therefore, if I have a large amount of water, and one of those three qualities became affected by impurity, then is the water pure still or not? I have a big pool of water, it got changed, a color changed by impurity. Is it still water? No, because one of the qualities changed. And what changed it is an impurity. That's the major point. And that's the second thing we want to add to what we're mentioning now. We're talking about impurities changing the water, not something pure changing the water. So this is important. You have to know the difference. Some things in Islam are impure and some things are pure. Which are more, purities or impurities? Huh? Purities, alhamdulillah. Allah made it easy for us, right? Impurities are small. Purities are the majority. So when I say the word impurity, the Shaykh didn't tell us now what najis is, but we can understand those things like urine and feces and things like these that we're going to find later out. There's actually a list of them. And the rule of thumb is this. If there's no proof to prove it's impure, it's pure. Al-asl fil a'yani tahara. Al-asl, the origin of all entities is tahara, period. It's a qa'idah. Principle you can walk with in your whole life. Someone comes today and says, this table is impure. We tell them, what's your proof? Right? You're not gonna think the opposite. It could be impure. Right? Some of us, I think we do that, right? But could be impure. No, it's pure. Where's the impurity? That's how you're supposed to walk. That's how you're supposed to think as a Muslim. And unfortunately, again, these things, they start from here. So the origin of all entities is purity. That's a period. That's a principle you can take with you. And the proof to make it impure, you need some evidence to show that it's impure in the Islamic legislation we're talking about. Not that I feel like it's not very clean. Just because you might not want it on your clothes doesn't mean it's impure. For example, ketchup, you don't want it on your clothes, but ketchup is not impure. See the difference? Right? You can pray with ketchup on your clothes, but you wouldn't go to the business meeting with ketchup on your clothes. That's the difference. Then, issue number 4, we'll take the benefit. The water has these three qualities. If the three qualities of water become affected by impurity, the water becomes impure. Even if it's a big amount or a small amount, irrelevant. As long as the three qualities have been changed. And the Shaykh said, when he used these qualities, he's talking about the qullatayn, the one he just told you, that usually doesn't get changed. Same applies to water which is running. So it's possible. Is it possible for an ocean to become impure? Possible? It's possible, but very unlikely. Right? Because ocean is a lot of water, but it's possible, right? If these things are met. But something like a lake or a creek is possible again, but not as likely. But this is the point we're taking. And last point on this, before I move on, this is a consensus amongst the scholars that water, if it reaches a large amount and becomes affected by impurity to the point that one of the three qualities change, it becomes najis, bil ijma', by consensus. Why is it important to mention by consensus? When the scholars call a consensus on an issue, it changes a lot. It's very strong evidence. So remember, in Islam we have evidences, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma' and Qiyas. Some of us remember this or maybe not know this. Quran, Sunnah, these are two core evidences we have. Then we have two subsidiary evidences that are based on the Quran and Sunnah. One of them is called consensus of the scholars, al-ijma', and the last one, the fourth one, is al-qiyas, analogy. So if the scholars authentically report, a reliable, right, scholars report a consensus on an issue, that's it. There's no argument there. I'm not allowed to come now and say I have a different view. So remember, it helps you to know the value of something when you hear it's an ayah, hadith, and ijma' that gives you surety. This is correct. Okay, now that we've learned this, the Shaykh now, he moves to the last part of this passage, issue number 5, fifth issue. He says, وَمَا سِوَى ذَلِكَ يَنْجُسُ بِمُخَالَطَةِ النَّجَاسَةِ. Whatever is not at the level of qullatayn, remember, whatever is not qullatayn, the high or large amount of water, it is rendered impure by any mixing of any impurities. Right? So issue number 5, that if water is not qullatayn, it's not a large amount, and then it becomes in contact with an impurity, it becomes automatically impure, irrelevant if the two qualities are changed or not. This is what the author's view is. This is one of the two opinions amongst the scholars. Water which is not qullatayn, not a large amount, immediately becomes impure by the contact of najasa. So again, think about like this water bottle in front of me. You put a drop of urine into it, drop. It becomes impure, according to this opinion. Okay, of course, a difference of opinion, but that's one of the two opinions, and majority of scholars are on that side, because this is the understanding they derived, and we're going to explain where they got it from. So you see the big difference? A drop. And the same is true that if you were to put something pure into it, and it mixed with it, it doesn't stay as the water anymore, it becomes something else immediately, in the same view. Someone says, what's the consensus on top? The consensus we mentioned a few minutes ago was that if a large amount of water gets affected by impurity to the point that one of the three qualities change, it becomes impure. That's consensus. Ijma'. That if a large amount of water gets in contact with impurities to the point the three qualities are changed. Okay, so now let's talk about this issue. The scholar, he mentioned this view, Ibn Qudama as a Hanbali scholar, one of the four madhabs of Islam, or the popular madhab. There are other madhabs, but these are the four schools of thought we all know. Many other scholars also hold this view, that if water doesn't reach the threshold of qullatayn, a drop of urine, a drop of feces, or a little bit of contact immediately makes it impure. Now many of you might not hold that view. Right? I'm sure many of you probably don't hold that view. So there's a second opinion, which is that that's not the case. So the first opinion is, any water that doesn't fulfill the quality of being a large amount of water. What's large amount of water mean again? Qullatayn. We have to keep repeating it. So if water is not qullatayn, not large amount, if it gets in contact with impurities, immediately it's najas. It doesn't matter if the quality is changed, because they say that water is very susceptible to impurities. That's the logic, and they have evidences for it as well. The same proof they used a minute ago, Hadith Ibn Umar, is the same proof. They say that the Hadith Ibn Umar, let me read it again. The Prophet ﷺ said, if water reaches the amount called qullatayn, it does not carry any khabath, any impurities. So the opposite understanding, the mafhum, the understanding of it, is that if water doesn't reach that amount, it will carry najas. Now, does anyone understand that proof? The hadith is, إِذَا كَانَ مَا قُلَّتَيْن, if water reaches qullatayn, لَمْ يَحْمِلْ khabath, it will not carry impurities. So the opposite is there now. The mafhum, in our legislation we have something called mafhum, the understanding which is not explicit, but it's implicit. The implicit meaning then, if water is not qullatayn, it carries khabath, if it comes in contact with impurity. And that's a good argument, right? It's very nice, clear, it's understood. That's a way the ulama understand evidences. And this is what we're trying to do in this class. We're not just trying to cover the issues, we're trying to appreciate some of the understandings of the fuqaha, because our scholars, when they derive rulings with knowledge, we try to understand it so we can be upon insight. So the question now is that the first opinion is this: if water doesn't reach qullatayn, any in contact with impurities makes it impure. If water reaches qullatayn, if it doesn't change the three qualities, it's still fine. That's the first opinion. Now, with this being said, the second opinion of scholars, and this is one many of our contemporary scholars hold this view, that they said that this division of water into large and small is actually not a very accurate division. It's not an accurate division. And they said that in reality, water, whether small or large, will always be pure unless one of the three qualities changes. And I think many of us will hold this view, and this one is more correct. وَأَقْرَبُ وَأَصْوَبُ وَاللَّهُ أَعْلَمُ. We're going to see it's a stronger opinion. Water, irrelevant of its size, like water in my bottle here, or water of the ocean, is always pure and purifying unless one of the three qualities changes. So the second opinion is a lot easier, but also textually stronger, as we're going to see in a minute. Now before we get to the second opinion, the ulama who hold the first opinion is many of them. You can even say the majority is on that side. And it's a benefit we take that if a majority of scholars hold one opinion, and a minority of scholars hold another opinion, can we say that the minority is wrong because the majority says otherwise? No, fiqh doesn't work that way. Yes, majority means it's a good sign that majority, if they hold this view, it must be strong because they have all reached the same conclusion. But at the end of the day, when it comes to fiqh, when you study it, you have the right to follow which of the two opinions, if there are two or three, whatever opinions available, by looking at the evidences. And if you can't understand the evidence, you choose the opinion which is safer or stronger. This is the best way out of it. But because we're studying fiqh, we're trying to understand it, we can look at both opinions and see what they've said. Then, the first opinion, we got it. Second opinion is that any water, no matter its size, will always be pure and purifying. Not just pure and purifying, until one of the three qualities changed. And they have many evidences, and the evidences, they are the ones we mentioned last week. Who remembers one ayah that proves that water is always pure? Yes. وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً طَهُورًا. What does Allah say here? We sent from the sky water, which is tahuran. What's tahuran mean? Pure in and of itself, purifying of other than itself. Allah said every water we sent from the sky is tahur. So if someone now comes and says that it is no longer going to be that case because it got in contact, we say no, that's the origin is purity until otherwise proven. Another proof they bring is a hadith. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, hadith Abu Sa'id al-Khudri, he said sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إِنَّ الْمَاءَ طَهُورٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ. إِنَّ الْمَاءَ, verily water is pure and purifying, لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ. Nothing makes it impure. So look at the wording. Verily water, all water is pure and purifying, nothing makes it impure. But then the hadith I cited earlier said if water is qullatayn, only then it's pure. So some of you are now seeing how there's going to be some kind of confusion. This is the nature of fiqh. When there's a khilaf, there's a reason for it. Sometimes some people think the ulama just go in khilaf because they like to make khilaf. Khilaf is sharr, a'udhu billah. Khilaf is evil, Ibn Mas'ud told us. So it's not differing because they want to, it's because they're reading the evidences. Okay, before I get into how the second group responds, we need to understand if water is always pure, when does it become impure? If its color changes, taste changes, or scent. That's it. That's the second opinion. Because they say the origin is all water is pure. So we cannot say that a small amount of water has special rulings versus a larger one. They say that kind of division is not correct. And now I'm going to explain what they mention. So the first opinion, again to repeat, is that water, which is qullatayn, large amount of water, never becomes impure unless one of its three qualities change, whereas a small amount of water becomes impure immediately by the mixing of impurities, just by the touch of it. The second opinion is all water is pure unless one of the three qualities change. And that second opinion is more correct, and it's also, we see many of our contemporary scholars, they hold this opinion. However, some of our other scholars hold the first opinion. And the difference between those two opinions is not just the difference in what they believe to be correct. A sheikh or an imam, he may pass a fatwa based on these opinions, as we'll see an example in a second. So now when you read books of fiqh or you read a fatwa or something, now you can get a better opinion of, oh, the scholar said this, okay, now I know because he takes this view. Whereas sometimes you may read one opinion and read another opinion and say, I'm confused. The sheikh said here in one fatwa and he changed the opinion there and he changes it again. He's not changing it. You're not understanding it. And it's important we have to appreciate our scholars and be fair. That's why it's always helpful to try our best to learn fiqh so Allah can give us the understanding that Allah gave to them. Okay, now let's look at the proofs that this second opinion hold. How did they answer the first hadith? That's the question I want to explain. The hadith of the first group is that إِذَا كَانَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْنِ لَمْ يَحْمِلْ الْخَبَثِ. How do I explain this hadith of قُلَّتَيْن then? If it's not, it's an authentic hadith, they say. So how do you explain this? I'm going to give you 4 answers. Right? And the reason why is to show you that when the scholars who are minority opinion held an opinion too, they have reasons. It makes fiqh more lively and more appreciative. It also makes you understand the importance of fiqh. But there's no criticism against the ulama who took the first opinion. These are imams. Ibn Qudama is the imam without any dispute. Okay, the first response, before I go there, whose opinion was the second opinion? The second opinion is the opinion of Imam Ibn Qayyim, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, and many of our contemporary scholars, Shaykh Ibn Baz, Ibn Uthaymeen, scholars that today we know, and many of them they hold this view. But from the past, you may say scholars like Imam Ibn Qayyim and Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. And they were Hanbalis too initially, so it's not like they're not. They used to be, and obviously they are mujtahidun too. They strive in defining rulings. First answer was that the hadith of Ibn Umar I cited is weak. That's their first response. The hadith of Ibn Umar about the Qullatayn is a weak hadith. And Ibn Qayyim actually himself spent a lot of time showing that the hadith is not authentic. He actually shows 16 different reasons why, from the text and the isnad. But is that a strong argument? Is it a weak hadith? To be fair, it's an authentic hadith. But you could argue, you could say if it's weak, it's an argument. Some scholars have said. So the first response is, the first hadith Ibn Umar is weak, the hadith Abu Sa'id al-Khudri I cited is authentic. So when you have 2 opinions and one is based on a weak hadith and one is based on authentic hadith, what do? You go with the authentic hadith. You see this? This is important. And doesn't mean that scholars who took the weak hadith didn't know that it's weak. Maybe they believed it was authentic. You have to have that appreciation as well. But if I believe it to be weak, it's different. But the ulama, some of them said it's weak. But the truth be told, the hadith Ibn Umar is authentic. And the hadith Abu Sa'id is authentic. So we need to go to a second way. Number 2. We have a proof that shows otherwise. If the hadith Ibn Umar said that water there's a lot doesn't become impure because the impurity is touching it, then who said water which is small becomes impure? Where is the proof for that? So the first group of scholars, they say that's understood implicitly from the text. But the second group of scholars say not so fast. We have another hadith that shows that it's actually not true. So let me read you the hadith that they cite. And it's the same hadith I just read to you, hadith Abu Sa'id al-Khudri. One day, Abu Sa'id al-Khudri said, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, a group of people came to him saying, Ya Rasulullah, there is water that's brought to us from a well called Buda'a, Bi'r Buda'a. It's a kind of well in Medina. And this well is a well in which when there's a flood or an overflow of rainwater, right? Because remember the well, it gets water from the rain and other groundwater. The water that when it gets flooded or rainwater comes, it pulls all kinds of impurities into it, like dead dog meat and other things get run with the water and then it falls into the well. Pay attention here. The Prophet ﷺ is asked about a well in which the offshoot of the water is that water comes down from rain, right? A lot of rain. And sometimes in the street there could be some dead animal or carcass and the water takes that and it drops into the well eventually. Some people when they read this hadith, they thought the Sahaba put the dead meat in the water. Hawla wa quwwata illa billah. Guys, alhamdulillah, we're Muslims, we don't believe this. But some people come and say, what is this? Companions are putting dead meat inside the well? And we're thinking again, who's telling us this? Sahaba will never do that. So we'll always be careful when those things come up. It's not the correct understanding. It's the running of the water in the streets finally falls into the well. And other types of excrement and impurities fall into the well. The question now the Sahaba are asking, Ya Rasulullah, can we use this well water? So pay attention. Well water, is it Qullatayn? We're going to see it's not Qullatayn. And it's getting contact with all kinds of impurities. قال عليه الصلاة والسلام إن الماء طهور لا ينجس الشيء. Water is pure, nothing makes it impure. This hadith is Sunan Abi Dawud, authentic hadith, hadith number 67. Sahih Sunan Abi Dawud, hadith number 67. Clearly shows that water, even if it's a small amount, if it comes in contact with impurities, does not make it impure. And what's the hadith showing? Imagine a well, in the bottom of the well could be some impurities that came in contact. But there's lots of water still. And the water still looks like water because when you draw it out the well, it's still water. The Prophet said it's pure. So this shows the understanding of the first opinion is not a very strong understanding, because this hadith clearly shows all water is pure unless one of the three qualities changes. And the ulama also have other responses, but I think that's sufficient, inshallah, to prove this opinion. Right? Because the scholars in the second opinion bring another. Okay, I'll bring one more. Third opinion. Proof. Ijma'. We just said there's an ijma', a consensus that all water is pure unless one of the three qualities changes. There's an ijma', as we said, that if water reaches qullatayn, and then nothing of the three qualities change, is pure. There's also another ijma' that says that all water is pure in origin. Okay, so now if water in origin is pure, and I come to you and say, brother, this water could be impure, who has the upper hand? The one who says it's pure, because it's ijma', there's a consensus water is always pure. So they say that the understanding of the first group, while plausible, can go against the consensus. Consensus is showing that clearly water is pure unless otherwise proven. They also have other usuli principles, but I think this is sufficient to prove the point. Like I said, Ibn Qayyim has 16 different ways, and there's more than this. And we're just going to suffice with that. So what do we take from this? What's our conclusion for issue number 5? All water is pure and only becomes impure if impurity changes the water, its taste, color, and scent. Now, somebody would say, can we give an example of the difference or the importance of this issue? Why do I need to know all of these details? Someone may say that. The issue is, it affects our understanding of what kind of water is pure and what is not. If you hold the second opinion, then there's no problem in using water in which a little bit of urine fell into it or something, but the water is still good. Or something pure fell into it, but it doesn't change the whole thing. Or I open my faucet and if the first part of the water is yellow a little bit. All that is fine, as we're going to get to, as long as it's called water. And the scholars who hold the second opinion, they use the hadith. Inna al-ma'a tahurun. This shows generality. Inna al-ma'a, all water. It's a benefit for those of us who studied Usul al-Fiqh. Alif wal-lam. In front of the word ma, what does it teach us? To feed the umum, right? Teaches us generality. Some of us might not know there's a principle. Alif al-lam al-mu'arraf, al-ma, all water. Not just some, all. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam benefited us with that. Okay, that issue, now I'm going to complete this issue by mentioning issue number 6. And I'm going to only mention one more after that and we'll finish. So total today we'll do 7 issues. So just bear with me, brothers. Issue number 6. What is qullatayn? This is a question now. How much is qullatayn? We're all wondering. The author, Ibn Qudama, says, وَقُلَّتَانِ ما قارب 108 أرطال بالدمشقي. Qullatan or qullatayn is approximately 108 Damascene pounds. Someone will say, what is that? In the past, they didn't use what we use today, liters and right, kilos and like this. They used a measure called artal or ratal. It's an old-fashioned measure. No longer we use it. So according to Ibn Qudama at that time, remember Ibn Qudama is 620 Hijri, 620 Hijri. At that time, he estimated, and the Hanbali scholars, 108 artal, which is pounds according to the Damascene. Damascene means Damascus measure. Right? You guys know Damascus, if something is from Dimashq, it's called Damascene in English. Right? That's just a benefit. Right? Damascene or Damascene, I think Damascene maybe. So 108 pounds according to the Dimashqi or the Damascus measure. That doesn't benefit any one of us because we don't know what that means. So our contemporary scholars calculated it. And now they found different numbers. So what is the calculation in today's time? One measure is 307 liters. 307 liters. Another measurement of some scholars, 270 liters. Another one, 190 kilos. And some of you keep writing. You're going to see my point. There's no fixed. 204 kilos. It keeps going. Ikhtilaf. So now I'm sitting and I'm thinking, qullatan, how much? 307, 270, 190, 204, so many khilaf, so many different numbers. Therefore, we don't know how much qullatayn is or qullatan. It just means a lot. And this is another proof that the second opinion is stronger. Because the Sharia doesn't make a ruling for something unclear. You see? Imagine someone came to you and say, can I use this water? Meaning you're going to say, let's measure how much water is in there. And then I'm going to say 307, no 270, and 108. Khalas, leave it alone. Let's go make tayammum. The Sharia doesn't attach rulings to things like this. This is a fa'idah. Because in the Sharia, when a number is needed for your ibadat, must be fixed, must be known. It's a benefit. Alhamdulillah for Islam. Imagine we actually had to calculate this. We couldn't be able to. So the ulama, they differed. And therefore the conclusion is, it's not clear. And all these numbers are estimations. May Allah reward the scholars for the efforts trying to understand it. So qullatayn then, it will be in our conclusion, any large body of water. Some ulama say like a bahr, like an ocean or something like that, a big water, pool. Think about like that, a big amount of water. So if qullatayn doesn't actually mean this, a fixed number, but actually means a large amount, then the second opinion is correct. Because as long as it's water, big or small, alhamdulillah, no problem now. Okay, let me give you a modern application to show you the benefit. Some of you guys like swimming, right? Here's a fatwa from the Permanent Committee, Lajnat Da'ima. The Permanent Committee in Saudi Arabia, right? There was a leading scholarly board there. They asked a question. Somebody has a swimming pool in their backyard, and some najasa fell into it. Right? I think all of you know, those who swim, people always urinate in the pool. Am I right? Wallahu alam, but this is what they say. You're in the swimming pool, najasa's in there. Someone urinated, or somebody dropped urine into the pool. And they said the amount of urine is like a cup worth. And the swimming pool is 12 meters long. Does this pool become najis now? So before we give the answer, what do you think? And brothers and sisters, based on what we studied? No? So the question is, the pool is 12 meters. That doesn't really help us, right? Because we're still finding out, is it qullatayn or not? So according to the first opinion, what's the ruling? It wouldn't be, right? For them, they might say this is qullatayn, it's big enough. But if it wasn't qullatayn, what would they say? It's in najas. See the big difference? Imagine you hold the first view and you're swimming in the swimming pool and somebody urinated on the other side of the pool. You have to get up. You have to leave. And more than that, imagine the water wasn't for urination. Let's say there's a community, we have rainwater collected from the roof. Back home, that's how they use the water, right? Some mouse fell in there. Right? Mouse is najis. If it dies, it becomes najis. Why? Dead meat. It's floating in the water. And we need the water. What we're going to do? You see the implications. It becomes more serious the more you look at it and the more you see the different views. The Permanent Committee, their answer was, water is judged to be najis if a color, taste, or scent changes by najasa, period. So which opinion does the Permanent Committee hold? Second opinion. And most of us, I believe, we will continue swimming, right? So, inshallah, we're on that opinion. I think some of us already hold that opinion. You didn't know, but brother, I take that opinion. Inshallah. That's, okay, now the last one, inshallah, we'll take for today, issue number 7. And we'll stop with this. The author now, he moves to talking about water used for cooking or other purposes. He says, وَإِن طُبِخَ فِي الْمَاءِ مَا لَيْسِ بِطَهُورٍ. He says now, if something that is pure but not purifying is cooked inside water. So the Shaykh is saying, now imagine you have water, you boil it on the stove and you put something like tea in there, or something like meat in there, or something like lentils in there. He's saying that water becomes pure but not purifying. Now what does that mean? What I'm going to teach us now in this issue, and we're going to cover it together now, and we'll stop with this. The author, he's telling us water is actually, can be divided into 3 categories altogether. This is the opinion of Ibn Qudama and all 4 madhabs. All 4 madhabs agree. Water is 3 categories. So how do we derive this understanding? What he's trying to say is that imagine you have a cup of water, you put your tea leaves in there. Before the tea boiled to become tea, it's just on the top. You stop the water and you put it off the stove. Is that water still purifying? According to him, no. That's no longer pure water. It's tahir water, pure, not purifying. It's a big difference. Me and you will say, no, it's still water. So now the author is telling us water is 3 types. This is for all life. All in life, water is 3 according to the 4 madhabs. But that doesn't mean it's the only opinion. Water can be, according to Ibn Qudama, 3 types. One is called water which is tahur, pure in and of itself, purifying of other things. Example, like this water in my bottle here. Pure in and of itself, purifying of other things. That's the original water. The second category of water, this is the controversial one, is water which is not purifying but still pure. It's controversial. This is a controversial opinion. In the sense, it's a majority opinion but not the stronger. Water which is tahir, not tahur, tahir. So that would be water in which it's still pure, but it lost its purifying qualities. How does that happen? That's the question. How does that happen? I'll give an example that the fuqaha they use. I woke up in the morning. What's the sunnah you do when you wake up in the morning? You wash your hands 3 times, right? I go to the washer and wash my hands 3 times. Or let's say I have a bucket. I put my hands in and wash it 3 times, now I'm done. That water is left over. Pure or purifying? They say that's pure water now, no longer purifying. I mean, you're like, how is that possible? Because you're pure, and you put your hand in the water which is pure. But now, because you mixed your hand with it, and Allah knows where your hand was, and it's not clear, and this is their opinion, that the water still is purifying. It lost its status. It's still pure, but not purifying. Obviously, that's not the strong opinion, but you're understanding that point. There's such thing. Or you cook the water and tea. But the tea leaves are very small. You don't have enough tea leaves. So your water is a little bit yellow, a little bit green tea, but not fully. As long as you can call it water, it's water. But the first opinion is, it's no longer water. It's pure, just pure. The last type of water is najis, impure. And everyone agrees to that. Impure water is not even water. It's something that becomes impure. But they call it impure because it's water that was water, then became impure. The correct opinion, which is the opinion of many of our contemporary scholars, water is only 2 types. There's no such thing as number 2. So we said there is 3, 1, 2, and 3, tahur, tahir, and najis. The second opinion is there's no such thing as tahir water, just tahur and najis. And I'll save us the debate and the difference of opinion. How did the second group of scholars conclude this? Simple. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told us about water. He never told us about a water called tahir. That's the first argument. Is there such thing as a water which is tahir? We have no dalil. وَأَنزَلْنَا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً طَهُورًا إِنَّ الْمَاءَ طَهُورٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُ. Where is tahir? So the other group of scholars try to derive our opinion, but they don't have nothing clear. Right? I'm going to save us the time and to go into what they mentioned, but there's nothing clear. The second proof is that, look, the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الْمَاءَ, all water is طَهُورًا. خلاص. That's all water is pure. So you cannot say another type. And this opinion is, again, many of our contemporary scholars, they hold it. And it's the opinion of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, some of the Hanafi scholars of the past and present. Right? So not the madhab, but the view of some of them. And we could say Shaykh al-Baz, Ibn Uthaymin, and others of our contemporary scholars. And so they make the argument, which many of us, I believe, also follow, but now we understand there is such an opinion. If I drop a little bit of something pure into water, or a little bit of something impure, but it doesn't change all of its qualities, and I can still call it water, it's good to go. There's no such thing as water that went to a middle state called pure, not purifying. And the second group of scholars have one more hadith, which is a very interesting hadith for the janazah, the funeral rites. When someone passes away, what do we do with the body? We wash it. And what are we supposed to wash it with? Water and? Just water. Soap. Or, Nabi Sallallahu said, sidr, lotus leaves. You know, lotus leaves, the big green leaves. This is supposed to, it's a cleaning agent, smells nice. It's supposed to mix it with water. Sunnah. Or kafuran, camphor. Or other agents. If you don't have that, use any perfume. Sunnah, right? How did the Prophet ﷺ tell us to wash a body, to purify it with water and scent? You guys following me? Sidr is a leaf. You put it in the water, you're washing the body to purify it, not to make it just pure. Purifying the dead body. which means the amount of kafur or sidr or agent you put in there is very small, but the water is a lot. So as long as it's called water, فَهُوَ طَهُورٌ لَيْسَ طَاهِرٌ. That makes sense? Imagine, when you go to the funeral rites, if someone washes their body, he mixes a big bowl of water with some little bit of scent. And this water is supposed to purify the dead body. According to the first opinion, that wouldn't work. So that means the first opinion is not very strong because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said this, and he said the other hadith, and he said the other hadith. And the Prophet never contradicts himself, alayhi salatu wasalam. So making sense? So this is a stronger opinion. And I believe most of us, again, we probably studied this before. The water is only two types. But now you benefit that the majority of scholars, when they hold a different opinion, they do have the evidences, but we're learning it as a way to understand. But like the ulama, when they teach these kind of books, our job is not to become Hanbali necessarily. You have all the right to follow the views of the Hanbali madhab or any other madhab. But you learn as a curriculum to learn the different opinions so you can grow in your knowledge. It's a tariq. So this is a manhaj for learning, curriculum. When it comes to amal, what you act upon, then that's based on what you believe to be more correct, based on the Quran and Sunnah, your understanding. If you can't understand the issues, then you ask someone reliable and trustworthy and you take their opinion, especially a person of knowledge. But we can take a great benefit to see that fiqh, one of the great virtues of our brothers and sisters, is the fact that this is our sharia. The complexity of it is needed for our lives. It's not just scholars sitting and discussing in some of us might think minutiae, right? Very small and fine details, big differences. But think about this. This is just a chapter of water. All right? There's so much more to go. Imagine the extent of fiqh. Imagine today in our Muslim world and the non-Muslim world, how much Muslims we can offer by these kind of jurisprudence. Fiqh is very important. It's a very good benefit for all of us, but also we have to try our best to learn the fiqh. And the ulama, when they teach this book, again, it's a beginner book. Their job is just to know the issues. If you remember the evidences, even better. That means you're stronger. But just remember, when you go home, just review the issues. Today we did issue number 7. And we'll stop with that. And if you don't have any questions, we'll take them. We'll start here with some of the questions here online. What is the answer for the question the Sahaba asked the Prophet ﷺ about the well? Since the well is stagnant, will it be impure with impurity? So the Sahaba, they asked Rasulullah ﷺ about the well, where some impurities were falling into it. And the water is stagnant. But it's still more than the impurities, to the point that the impurities don't change its 3 qualities. Hence, according to the second opinion, it's still pure. Because when they used to draw the water out of the well, it's pure water. Therefore, إِنَّ الْمَاءَ طَهُورٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ بِالشَّيْءٍ. Water is all pure, doesn't become impurified, najis by anything, unless the qualities change. So the measure now, we also mentioned that the amount for qullatayn, there's difference of opinion. 307 liters is one example, 270 and others. Inshallah, anyone else have any question? Yes?
When you say impure, for example, if you mix a lot of juice into water, does that mean that it's not, does it mean both not pure and purifying, or does it mean that it's not purifying, but you can still drink it?
Let's say it again, have fun.
Like when you say that water becomes impure,
Mm-hmm.
does that also mean, for example, you pour orange juice inside the water? Like you can't use it for wudu, but you still drink it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you understand can you still call it pure but not purifying?
So that's the thing. I was asking if water is only 2 categories, pure and purifying, and impure. When water falls into the second category, you can't use it for wudu or anything because there's najis now. It's impurity. But according to the first opinion, there's a middle category. That middle category, you can drink it, you can wash with it, like for example, just not for ibadah, just for other things. But you can't use it for rafa'ul hadath wal zibal al-khabath. Remember again, what's the water for? The first lesson we took, why do we need water anyways? 2 things, to remove ritual impurity and to remove impurities. So they say once it falls into number category 2, you can do everything but those 2 things. Rafa' al-hadath wa zibal al-khabath. Does that make sense? So you can drink it, you can maybe put your clothes in if you want, but you can't do the rafa' al-hadath, you can't make wudu with it. You can't purify clothes with it in the sense of purifying najasa, but you can do other things with it. That's what they're saying.
And the first thing, you would say that you can't even do those 2 things?
Yeah, even then, exactly. Because they say that once the water is no longer tahur, it's out of it. So we say that no, as long as we're going to get to next week, as long as you can call it water, it's in the first category. It never changes the second unless one of the 3 qualities changes. And this makes things easier too because it also changes the confusion that comes. Because as we'll see, sometimes water can become entirely changed by agents, like orange juice. We agree once it becomes orange juice, it's no longer water. But if it's a little bit of orange juice, that's next week's lesson, because this is the confusion that the first category and second category, the first category has a hard time deciding, where the second opinion is easier to determine. Inshallah. Yes, any question? You had a question?
Actually, my question was regarding this. But you said it's next lesson.
Inshallah, next year, yeah, we're going to get...
If they use a bottle of Sprite for istinja, for example, is that permissible? Is it considered water?
So a bottle of Sprite, for example, to istinja. So for us, we took the lesson last week. For those who were here, what did we say about istinja and those kind of things? If you're gonna remove impurities, do you need to use water? Huh? You have to water. That's one opinion. Second opinion was? You don't have to water. So it goes back to that issue. There's two opinions. When it comes to removing impurities, you have to use water, was what the Imam taught us. The second opinion, you can use anything. So you can use this. You can use Sprite to remove istinja, although it's not the best use of Sprite. Right? Any other questions? Yes.
So you mentioned that like a cup of urine falls into a swimming pool. The second opinion is that the water is still pure. Like you can do wudu and it's fine. But doesn't that go directly against the hadith that you mentioned? The Prophet ﷺ said, if don't urinate in still water, then you can't.
So that's a very good question. We said, according to the second opinion, a cup of urine falling into a swimming pool won't make the swimming pool impure. But the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us, don't urinate in stagnant water. So now, if I urinate in stagnant water, does the water become impure? So there's two different issues. One is the purity of the water, and second is the adab of using the washroom. So on Friday classes, we took the etiquette of things, and we learned the benefit. When the Prophet tells us, alayhi salatu wasalam, do this, don't do that, bin bab al-adab, in the chapter of etiquette, it's a recommendation. If you don't do it, you did something disliked, and if it's something like this, where you could, for example, here, urinating swimming pool is disliked. Not haram in the sense that if someone did it because we believe water is still pure. So there's two different issues. You can still use the water, but the one urinating shouldn't have urinated. But if someone did it, it's still good to go. So there's two different issues. So we take a benefit of that. The Prophet told us how to use the washroom. But if someone did use the washroom in the wrong place, meaning you can still benefit from the water. And also removes the doubt and the worry that we have to check if someone used the washroom after us or before us when we go to the water source. Like when you go to Lake Ontario, for example, I don't have to check who came before and did what. Alhamdulillah. Because then it'll also be something you can never solve. So that's how you explain the issue. But it's very important we don't sully the water. The scholars, some of them, they took the view it's haram to do it out of fear that you're going to ruin the water. Even though they agree, dislike, they said shouldn't do it to stop people from trying to do it. Right? But inshallah, that makes sense. Any other questions? Yes.
So if the water has like a good scent, could you still use it to purify as in like make wudu?
Oh, it's a good question. If the water still has some good scent, can we still use it? Inshallah, next week. Because next week, the author he talks about when something pure mixes with water to the point that it changes its name. And so we're going to get to this point. Let's say water it has 2 out of 3 qualities. Right? Like, you know what they call it? Sparkling water. Right? Scented water. Inshallah, next week we're going to get to those issues. Question says, can you make wudu with running water or can it be still? You can make wudu with running water, still water, as long as it's water. فَإِن لَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً. If you don't find water, any water, فَتَيَمُّمْ سَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. Then you make tayammum. So that's another benefit that if I'm outside and out and about, I need to make wudu, any water, as long as you call it water, you can use it. Alhamdulillah. It makes our life so much easier. Question says, but in the hadith they mentioned the water in the well was being mixed with dead animals. So according to the second opinion, how would it be pure? It mixed with, so the second opinion says that the dead meat that flowed into the well mixed with the water, but it didn't change the 3 qualities. That's the point. Because so it's imagine some dead meat or something in the bottom of the water. Then lots of water on top of it. And I go, and then after I pull the water out the well and it's pure. And we're going to see also as we go along the book, one way to purify impurities is by adding more pure. For example, if I have this bottle of impure water, how do I make it pure? One way, more add water. And the same thing, the well keeps pouring and pouring and pouring, the well became pure. And the Sahaba already knew it was pure, but they were making sure because they knew also what happens to the water. Any other questions? Yes.
Just to clarify, this other 7 is that if something that is cooking utensils like tea leaves or something that you use to cook, the masala in question, there's 2 different opinions about it. The water, does it stay pure or does it become impure, correct?
So yes, so like we said, the issue the brother asking about the water, if it gets mixed with something pure, we cook with it something pure, There's two opinions. One that it becomes tahir, not tahur, and the other is just still tahur. So based on what we're studying here, the scholars, Ibn Qudama's view was, as long as it mixed to it to the point that some of the qualities changed. But they also have another question, which is that as long as it got mixed with something pure, it's no longer purifying. So they just call it pure. You could do other things, everything but the other ritual impurity or purifying impurities. But we say that the second opinion is stronger. So if I cook lentils in water, and after I'm done cooking it, I pour out, better example, pasta. I put pasta in the water, I'm done with the pasta, I pour the water. What do I get at the end? I have some kind of water. Allah knows what kind it is. This kind of water, is it pure or purifying? This is the question we're going to talk about next week. So according to them, it mixed with something pure, it's just pure now. We're going to say that we have to investigate more to find out if it's purifying. Because we believe the asl is still purifying.
So what's the question is, if some water that's pure is mixed with something else that's pure,
Yes.
the origin of food is pure.
Yes, so something pure mixes with something like water which is pure, it doesn't make it impure, it makes it pure. So for example, I make tea with water, I have tea now. Tea is pure, but it's not water. That's what we're gonna explore next week. The fact that you called it tea means it's no longer water, but it is pure, because the origin of all things is purity, as you're right. Question says, in terms of small amounts of impurities falling in water, that is a large amount, is the same concept of putting gelatin or alcohol in foods. So this is a good question we didn't mention, but some of the scholars like Shaykh Islam Ibn Taymiyyah says the rule we just talked about water applies to all liquids. So if I have oil and a little bit of impurity fell into it, it didn't change the quality of the oil is oil. Of course, it doesn't purify things, but oil is good to go. Another example would be, and we cover this in fiqh of food and drink, I have a big vat of milk, small amount of rennet that's needed to make the milk, right, coagulate, whatever it is they call it, to make it into the cheese. Does that become najis now, the milk? No way, right? It's pure. And this is the point we have to remember. If you go back to fiqh of food and drink, we talked about this issue, but we talked about it from a different angle. But now if we come back to the fiqh issue, even if you told me, brother, it doesn't go to istihala, wala istihlak. I'm sorry for those who weren't there in the fiqh class, we mentioned these terms. I would say even then, is it pure or impure? So see, even if you told me it's impurity, a lot of purity, Ibn Taymiyyah says it's still pure. Allahu Akbar. Look at the different jihad, the ulama look at the mas'ala. They look at one issue from three ways. Me and you, maybe we say it's haram from one angle. The fiqh comes on this angle, on that angle, on this angle. And this is the point of fiqh. It's not to make a ruling based on one issue, one look. It's look at everything. And this also teaches that we have to have appreciation for the fuqaha, and also, inshallah, encourage us to learn. I said one more question or any of the last questions, otherwise we'll end. Yes?
If we don't find pure water for making wudu, can we use the impure water?
So a good question. I cannot find pure water, and I have impure water. Can I use it to make wudu? No, because impure water is not allowed to be benefited from. If it's impure, you can't use it for wudu. You should definitely not drink it. Well, it's not good for you. You should not do anything else with it. You get rid of it, or you purify it, as we'll talk about as we come along. And so that's a benefit too. Once the water if you cannot call something water, or got to the point that it became impure, what's the next step you do? Tayammum. Alhamdulillah. And we end with this. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.